Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. What an honor it is to be with you all. Who's ready to flip Iowa's 2nd Congressional District? Yes! For those of you who I haven't met, I'm Lindsay James. I am a mom. I am a chaplain. I'm a state representative. And for those of you who ever known or loved a redhead in your life, you know the truth about us. We're pretty fiery, pretty feisty, and let me tell you, I've got some things to say to folks in Washington, D.C. But I want to tell you that I didn't actually come into this work through a boardroom or a lobbying office. I came into this work through a seminary. So I am, as I mentioned, an ordained Presbyterian pastor and spent the bulk of my career as a chaplain, showing up for people in some of their hardest moments. And that journey into chaplaincy work began nearly 25 years ago after the events of 9/11. So I actually watched the events of 9/11 unfold on a television set in such a dark and horrifying moment in our country's history. And as I watched that unfold, it just felt so distant and so unreal. And it would become very real to me 2 days later when I learned that a friend of mine spent her last moments in this life alongside the heroes of Flight United 93, the flight that fought back. Now, this flight was known for ordinary people who had extraordinary courage, who would then take action in a way that would prevent an even larger catastrophe from happening. But that journey, that day in our country, all of us responded differently. And my response, I knew in that moment that I had to become a chaplain. Because chaplains, what do? As I mentioned earlier, they show up for people in their hardest moments and connect with people when they are at, a point of grief and loss and often desperation. And I knew that that was what I was being called to do. Now, that was an important journey that shaped my life, but I want to share with you a scripture that actually has shaped my life as well. How many of you are familiar with the parable of the Good Samaritan? So that's a familiar story, but let's do a little refresher. So the parable of the Good Samaritan, someone is, hurt and harmed and left alone on the side of a road. And what happens? Someone with resources comes by, sees that person hurt and harmed on the side of the road, and what do? They turn a blind eye and they walk the other way. And then someone else comes along and sees that person hurt and harmed on the side of the road, and what do? They turn a blind eye and they walk the other way. That to me sounds a lot like what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. Those who have the power and the authority to actually do something are turning a blind eye and walking away from people who are hurting and harmed. It takes the Good Samaritan to come up on that person, see them hurt, grab hold of them, and give them the care that they need. But what I love so much about this parable is that the interpretation that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave when speaking about this particular parable. King said, it's not just our moral obligation as people to go pick up the person who is hurting and harmed on the side of the road. It's our moral obligation to fix the road. Because what King knew about this road was that it was notoriously a dangerous place where people were regularly hurt and harmed. And if it wasn't fixed, what would happen? People would continue to be harmed as they went about it. So much of this moment for me, and what I want you to know about me, is that I am so deeply shaped by my faith commitments and my call to help those who are hurting and harmed on the side of the road and to fix the road. There are so many challenges that Iowans are facing in our country and in our state. Now, I have knocked thousands of doors over the last years. In fact, I like to point out that I have a callus on my knuckle because I've knocked so many doors over the years. And I am hearing the same story over and over again, just a different iteration of it. People are making impossible choices because of their economic realities. People are making impossible choices because they are living paycheck to paychecks in a cost of living crisis that we are facing right now. It's the mom who shared with me that she is making the impossible choice. Do I pay for my utility bill or do I buy my daughter a winter coat? It's the dad who shared with me that he's making the impossible choice. Do I put food on the table for my kids or do I pay for rent? It's the man in one of the mobile home communities in my area where the park had been purchased by out-of-state predatory corporations and private equity firms that came into his community and started price gouging people out of their very home. It's that gentleman who shared with me that he was making the impossible choice. Do I pay my rent and keep my mobile home, or do I pay for my insulin medication and keep my foot? These are the kinds of impossible choices that people are making, and they're doing it in the wealthiest country in the world, and I think all of us can agree that that is not right. This past summer, when I saw the quote, big beautiful bill come down from Washington, D.C., and I would argue that it's only beautiful for billionaires, I learned that 27,000 Iowans just in Iowa's 2nd Congressional District were about to lose their health care. Right now, because of ACA cuts, we are losing vital resources out of our rural healthcare systems. And the result of that, we had 100 medical providers lose their jobs in Grinnell. We had 34 medical providers lose their jobs in Mason City. We had a hospital clinic close in Traer. All of this within Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. People are making impossible choices because they are one healthcare emergency away from losing their home or being in financial trouble. And they're doing that, and again, in the wealthiest country in the world. But it's not just that. We are 50th in the economy. We're 48th in the country when it comes to wages. Our wages are stagnant. People are struggling desperately with these impossible choices as costs go up. Costs of groceries, costs of gasoline, everyday healthcare costs. And one of the things that is so profoundly significant is the reality that we're seeing a loss of resources in rural healthcare system. And what else are we seeing? That we are #1 in the country for rising cancer rates. We're #2 in the country for the sheer number of cancer cases in Iowa. That combination is a catastrophe, and it is time for a change. But it's not just everyday hardworking families that are feeling the pinch. Our farmers, because of these tariffs, they're making impossible choices as well. The cost of fertilizers and gasoline, the cost for independent farmers when it comes to their health insurance. I had a farmer share with me that he was making the impossible choice that his wife had to go get a second job in town just so they could afford health insurance. And you know what? Yes, the cost of fertilizer and gasoline are over significant amounts, and it's making people being forced to make impossible choices. So you know what happened? His wife went into town. She got a second job so they could afford health care. And then what happened? They were shorthanded on the farm operation, had to make another impossible choice. They had to ask their son, who was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities in high school, to come and make up and work on the family farm in order to make up for the loss of hands on the operation. People, again, are making impossible choices in the wealthiest country in the world, and that is not right. So let me tell you what we're up against in this race, because I am a fiery, feisty redhead who has some things to say to folks in Washington, D.C. to change the everyday realities of hardworking families here in our country. But let me tell you what we're up against. We are running in, we're learning the closest, most competitive U.S. House race in the country. We are running against a person by the name of Joe Mitchell, who has used his time in government to further enrich his own businesses. This is someone who was a state legislator turned lobbyist, turned bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. when he served in HUD. He is someone who is running on an anti-corruption campaign, which is absolutely laughable. Why? Because he is literally talking about banning the legislator to lobbyist pipeline when he is exactly that, a former legislator who became a lobbyist. And he's doing that for real estate developers. And he used his position and his authority and his power to enrich his own businesses when working in Washington, D.C. People are ready for a change. You know what they are looking for? I hear it all across Iowa's 2nd Congressional District and all across the state. People are longing for a leader with the courage of conviction and a moral compass to go fight for them every single day in Congress. And you better believe I'm going to take all of my experience and my heart and your stories, and we are going to make some changes that actually make a difference in the lives of our family right here in this state. So thank you for being here. 75 days, friends. Let's flip this seat. Thank you. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Virginia.